The morning sun
What's the
cast long
status?
shadows
Report!
across the military
Scramble the
academy's
jets now!
courtyard as Elena
Get me the
Rodriguez
president!
walked through the gates for the first time.
Black Talon, launch
Her
immediately.
worn-out
Hostiles
sneakers
inbound.
squeaked against
Copy.
the
Systems
polished
green,
marble
scrambling
floor,
now.
a
Go.
stark
We'll cover you.
contrast to the crisp leather boots that surrounded her. The other cadets turned to stare, their eyes scanning her civilian clothes and the small duffel bag that contained everything she owned. Elena had grown up in the poorest district of the city, where broken streetlights flickered like dying stars, and the sound of gunfire was as common as morning birds. Her father had died in a factory accident when she was 12, leaving her mother to work 3 jobs just to keep food on their table. The military academy represented something Elena had never dared to dream of, a chance at a real future. But from the moment she stepped into the dormitory, it became clear that her background made her an outsider. The other cadets came from military families, their fathers and grandfathers having served with distinction. They spoke in confident voices about strategy and honor, while Elena quietly observed from the corners, trying to learn everything she could. Captain Morrison, the drill instructor, seemed to take particular pleasure in pointing out Elena's deficiencies. During morning exercises, he would bark orders at her specifically, making her repeat push-ups when the others had already finished. "Rodriguez," he would shout across the training ground, "this isn't a charity program. You either keep up or get out." The other cadets quickly picked up on the captain's attitude. During mealtimes, they would whisper among themselves, casting glances in Elena's direction. She heard fragments of their conversations, words like scholarship case and doesn't belong here, floating across the cafeteria like poison in the air. Sarah Chen, whose father was a decorated colonel, seemed to be the unofficial leader of the group that made Elena's life difficult. She had perfect posture, perfect grades, and a perfect way of making cutting remarks that sounded almost polite. "It must be so hard," Sarah would say with false sympathy. "Coming here without any family tradition to guide you, I can't imagine how overwhelming it must feel." Despite the constant mockery and isolation, Elena threw herself into her studies with desperate determination. She spent every free moment in the library, reading military history and strategy manuals until her eyes burned. While the other cadets socialized or relaxed, she practiced drill movements in her room, using a mirror to correct her form. The physical training was brutal. Elena's body, though strong from years of manual labor helping her mother, wasn't prepared for the intense regimen. She would collapse into bed each night, her muscles screaming in protest, only to wake up before dawn to practice some more. The other cadets seemed to glide through the exercises effortlessly, their bodies already conditioned by years of private training and expensive sports clubs. 3 months into the program, Elena's grandmother came to visit. Maria Rodriguez was a small, weathered woman who had raised 7 children and worked as a seamstress for 40 years. She spoke broken English mixed with rapid Spanish, and her presence in the pristine academy hallways drew curious stares. During their brief visit in the courtyard, Elena's grandmother pressed something into her hand, a small, tarnished pendant on a thin chain. "This belonged to your great-grandfather," she said in Spanish, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "He wore it through 3 wars. It will protect you, mija." Elena looked down at the pendant. It was old and simple, made of what looked like cheap metal. The design was hard to make out through the tarnish, but it appeared to be some kind of bird with outstretched wings. She thanked her grandmother and tucked it away in her locker, not wanting to give the other cadets another reason to mock her. The harassment continued and even intensified. During a particularly difficult tactical exercise, Elena made a small error in her calculations. Captain Morrison seized on this mistake, making her stand at attention while he berated her in front of the entire class. "This is what happens when we lower our standards," he announced. One mistake from someone like Rodriguez could get real soldiers killed. The words stung worse than any physical punishment. Elena felt her face burn with shame as the other cadets snickered behind her. She wanted to defend herself, to explain that she had stayed up until 3 in the morning studying those same tactical principles, but military protocol demanded silence. That night, Elena sat alone in her room, seriously considering packing her few belongings and leaving. She pulled out her grandmother's pendant, holding it up to the light. For the first time, she really studied the design. As she cleaned away some of the tarnish with her sleeve, the bird became clearer. It wasn't just any bird. It was a detailed eagle with sharp talons extended, and there was something written around the edge in letters so small she could barely make them out. She borrowed a magnifying glass from the science lab the next day and examined the pendant more carefully. The words around the edge were in Latin, Aquila nigra, and below that, even smaller, were numbers that looked like dates and coordinates. Elena's heart began to race as she realized this might be more than just a simple family heirloom. During her next library session, instead of studying current military tactics, Elena found herself researching military insignia and historical units. She learned that Aquila Nigra meant Black Eagle in Latin, and that eagles had been symbols of elite military units throughout history. But she couldn't find any specific references to a Black Talon or Black Eagle unit that matched the time frame suggested by the dates on the pendant. The research consumed her free time. Elena began staying in the library until it closed, cross-referencing historical documents and military records. She discovered that many special operations units from past decades had their records classified or buried in archives that weren't available to academy students. Her academic performance surprisingly began to improve. The historical research was giving her a deeper understanding of military strategy and traditions. She started making connections between past campaigns and current tactical doctrine that impressed even her most skeptical instructors. But the social situation remained unchanged. If anything, Elena's improved performance seemed to make the other cadets more resentful. Sarah Chen's comments became sharper, more pointed. "I heard Rodriguez has been living in the library," she said loudly during one meal. "I guess when you don't have family stories to learn from, you have to read about other people's ancestors instead." Elena bit her tongue and continued eating, but inside she felt something hardening. The pendant had become more than just a family keepsake. It was a reminder that she came from something, that her family had a history worth honoring, even if she didn't fully understand it yet. The breaking point came during a weekend training exercise. The cadets were divided into teams for a complex wargame scenario. Elena found herself assigned to a group led by Marcus Webb, whose grandfather had been a famous general. Marcus made it clear from the start that he considered Elena dead weight. "Just try to stay out of the way, Rodriguez," he told her as they prepared their strategy. "This exercise counts toward our final rankings, and some of us actually care about our careers." Elena nodded silently. But as she listened to their plan, she could see fatal flaws in their approach. The strategy was textbook perfect, but completely predictable. Any competent opposing force would see through it immediately. She tried to speak up, but Marcus cut her off. "We don't need input from someone who learned everything from books," he said dismissively. "Some of us have been breathing military strategy since birth." The exercise went exactly as Elena had predicted. Their team walked straight into an ambush, failing the scenario completely. As they trudged back to base, Marcus turned his frustration on Elena. "If you had moved faster during the retreat, we might have salvaged something," he accused, despite the fact that Elena's positioning had been the only thing preventing their total capture. That night, Elena sat in her room feeling more isolated than ever. She pulled out the pendant again, holding it like a talisman against despair. Under the harsh, fluorescent light, she noticed something she had missed before. Tiny scratches on the back that looked deliberate, like a code or message. She spent hours trying to decipher the markings, copying them carefully onto paper and trying different interpretation methods. Nothing made immediate sense, but she had the growing conviction that this pendant held secrets that went far beyond a simple family heirloom. The next morning brought news that would change everything. General Harrison, one of the most decorated officers in the current military, was coming to the academy for an inspection and evaluation. The cadets were told to prepare for individual interviews where their knowledge, bearing, and potential would be assessed. Elena approached the interview with the same determined preparation she brought to everything else. She studied the general's career, his major campaigns, and his known preferences in military doctrine. But nothing could have prepared her for what was about to unfold. As Elena stood in the hallway outside the interview room, she unconsciously touched the pendant through her uniform shirt. The other cadets waited nearby, their confidence evident in their relaxed postures and quiet conversations about family connections and expected recommendations. Sarah Chen emerged from her interview with a satisfied smile. "He asked about my father's service in the Pacific campaign," she announced to the group. "We had a wonderful conversation about leadership traditions." Marcus Webb nodded knowingly. "My uncle served under Harrison in Kosovo. I'm sure he'll remember the Webb family's contributions." Elena felt her stomach tighten. She had no family connections to discuss, no shared military heritage to bond over. All she had was her determination, her hard-earned knowledge, and a mysterious pendant whose significance she still didn't fully understand. When her name was called, Elena walked into the interview room with her head held high. General Harrison was exactly as imposing as his photographs suggested. Tall, silver-haired, with eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they saw. His uniform was immaculate, decorated with ribbons and medals that represented decades of distinguished service. "Cadet Rodriguez," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "I'd been reviewing your file. Quite an unusual background for our academy." Elena straightened her shoulders. "Yes, sir. I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve." "Tell me about your family's military tradition," the general said, leaning back in his chair. It was clearly a standard question, one that every other cadet had probably answered with pride. Elena felt her cheeks burn. "Sir, I don't have a military family tradition. My father worked in a factory, and my mother cleans offices. I'm the first in my family to pursue military service." She expected to see disappointment or dismissal in the general's eyes, the same expression she had grown accustomed to seeing from Captain Morrison and the other instructors. Instead, General Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "I see. And what drives someone without military heritage to pursue this path?" Elena took a deep breath. This was her chance to explain, to make him understand that her motivation came from something deeper than family tradition. "Sir, I believe service is about protecting people who can't protect themselves. I've seen what happens in communities where there's no security, no hope. I want to be part of something that makes a difference." The general made a note on his pad. "Admirable sentiment. Now, I'd like to discuss your academic performance. Your instructors note significant improvement over the past few months, particularly in military history and strategic analysis." Elena felt a spark of hope. "Yes, sir. I've been spending considerable time researching historical campaigns and tactics. I find that understanding the past helps illuminate current doctrine." "Indeed. Give me an example." Elena launched into a detailed analysis of a World War II operation, drawing parallels to modern asymmetric warfare tactics. As she spoke, she could see the general's attention sharpen. He began asking more complex questions, probing her understanding of strategy, logistics, and leadership. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Elena felt she was being evaluated purely on her merit rather than her background. The conversation ranged across different conflicts and military principles, and Elena found herself drawing on all those late nights in the library. "Impressive," General Harrison said finally. "Your analysis shows both theoretical understanding and practical insight. That's a rare combination." Elena felt a flush of pride, but the general wasn't finished. "There is one more thing, Cadet Rodriguez. I notice you wear a pendant. Military jewelry must be regulation or have special significance. May I see it?" Elena's heart skipped a beat. She had forgotten that the chain was barely visible above her collar. With trembling fingers, she pulled out the pendant, unclasping it and handing it across the desk. The moment General Harrison's eyes fell on the small tarnished piece of metal, his entire demeanor changed. His back straightened, and his face went completely pale. He held the pendant closer to the light, examining it with an intensity that made Elena's pulse race. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena swallowed hard. "It belonged to my great-grandfather, sir. My grandmother gave it to me when I started at the academy. She said he wore it through 3 wars. General Harrison was silent for a long moment, turning the pendant over in his hands. When he looked up at Elena, his eyes held a mixture of shock, respect, and something that looked almost like fear. "Cadet Rodriguez," he said slowly, "do you have any idea what this is?" Elena stared at General Harrison's transformed expression, her mouth suddenly dry. The pendant looked so small and insignificant in his large hands, yet it had triggered such a dramatic reaction that she could feel the energy in the room shift completely. "No, sir," she managed to say. "I only know that my grandmother said it belonged to my great-grandfather." "I've tried researching the symbols, but I haven't found much information." General Harrison set the pendant down carefully on his desk, as if it were made of explosive material rather than tarnished metal. He walked to the office door, locked it, and then moved to the window, closing the blinds with deliberate precision. "Cadet Rodriguez," he said, returning to his seat, "what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. This conversation never happened. Do you understand?" Elena nodded, though her mind was racing with questions. The general picked up the pendant again, holding it so that the light caught the faded engravings. "This is the insignia of the Black Talon unit," he said quietly. "One of the most elite and secretive special operations forces in military history. They operated during World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, conducting missions so classified that most of their records were destroyed or buried in archives that officially don't exist. Elena felt her heart pounding. My great-grandfather was in special operations? More than that, General Harrison continued, his voice filled with a respect that bordered on reverence. The Black Talon unit consisted of only 12 men at any given time. They were selected not just for their combat skills, but for their ability to operate completely independently behind enemy lines for months at a time. They were ghosts, legends. Most people in the military believed they were just stories, myths created to intimidate enemies. He turned the pendant over, pointing to the tiny scratches Elena had noticed. These markings indicate rank in mission history. Your great-grandfather wasn't just a member of Black Talon. According to these symbols, he was their leader for the final 3 years of the unit's existence. Elena's world seemed to tilt on its axis. The man her family had described as a quiet factory worker who came home from the war and never spoke about his service had been leading one of the most elite military units in history. But, sir, Elena said, struggling to process the information, why would this be kept secret if they were heroes? General Harrison's expression darkened, because some of their missions required them to operate outside normal military protocols. They prevented several catastrophic attacks on American soil, stopped biological weapons from being deployed, and eliminated threats that could have changed the course of the war. But their methods were sometimes unconventional. He stood and moved to a filing cabinet, producing a thick folder marked with security classifications Elena had never seen before. After the Vietnam War ended, the decision was made to officially disband Black Talon. The surviving members were given new identities and sworn to secrecy. They disappeared back into civilian life, and the unit became officially non-existent. Elena watched as he flipped through pages of documents. Stopping at a photograph, he turned it toward her, and she gasped. The man in the military uniform looked exactly like her grandfather in the old family photos, but younger, and wearing the same pendant that now lay on the desk between them. Captain Eduardo Rodriguez, General Harrison read from the file, operated under the code name Shadow Eagle, led Black Talon through some of the most dangerous missions in the Pacific Theater, and later in Korea, credited with saving thousands of lives through intelligence gathering and strategic eliminations. Elena stared at the photograph, seeing her own eyes looking back at her from her great-grandfather's face. He never told anyone, she whispered. Not even my grandmother knew. She just said he came back different from the war. That was the point, General Harrison explained. These men sacrificed not only their lives during service, but their recognition afterward. They could never speak about their accomplishments, never seek credit for their heroism. They lived and died as ordinary citizens, carrying extraordinary secrets. The general closed the file and looked directly at Elena. But now we have a problem, Cadet Rodriguez. The fact that you possess this pendant, that you've somehow found your way to military service, suggests that perhaps some secrets are meant to be revealed. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Sir, I don't understand. Is there something wrong with me being here? General Harrison shook his head slowly. Not wrong, exactly. But there are protocols in place for situations like this. When family members of Black Talon operatives surface in military service, they undergo special evaluation. The skills, the instincts, the particular type of intelligence required for that kind of work, these things sometimes run in families. He opened another section of the file, revealing psychological profiles and test results. Your performance here at the Academy has been remarkable. Not just academically, but in ways that mirror the profiles of original Black Talon recruits. Your ability to operate under pressure, to see strategic solutions that others miss, your resilience in the face of harassment. These are indicators. Elena felt overwhelmed. Indicators of what, sir? That you might be suitable for a very different kind of military service than what you originally enlisted for, General Harrison said carefully. There are opportunities available for individuals with your particular background and aptitude, but they would require leaving this academy, undergoing specialized training, and accepting assignments that officially don't exist. The room fell silent as Elena tried to process what she was hearing. Everything she had worked for, all the humiliation and struggle to prove herself worthy of a place in the regular military, and now she was being told she might belong in something entirely different. Sir, I need to ask something, Elena said finally. The other cadets here, the instructors who've been treating me like I don't belong, do they know about any of this? General Harrison's face hardened. Absolutely not. and their behavior toward you has been noted and will be addressed. Captain Morrison in particular has demonstrated the kind of narrow thinking that has no place in modern military leadership. Elena felt a surge of vindication, but it was mixed with uncertainty about her future. What happens now, sir? Do I have to make a decision immediately? No, the general assured her. You have time to consider, but I will tell you this. The current geopolitical situation requires individuals with very specific skills. There are threats emerging that conventional military units aren't equipped to handle. Threats that require the same kind of unconventional approach that Black Talon once provided. He handed her back the pendant, and as Elena clasped it around her neck, she felt the weight of it differently now. It wasn't just a family heirloom. It was a legacy, a responsibility she had never known existed. Can you tell me more about these threats, sir? General Harrison considered his words carefully. Terrorist networks that operate like ghosts, state actors conducting warfare through cyberspace and economic manipulation, weapons technologies that could destabilize entire regions, the kind of challenges that require soldiers who can think beyond traditional military doctrine. Elena nodded slowly. And do you think I might be capable of this kind of work? I think your great-grandfather's blood runs in your veins. The general replied. And I think the fact that you found your way here, with that pendant at this particular moment in history, is not a coincidence. A knock on the door interrupted their conversation. General Harrison quickly returned the classified files to their cabinet and unlocked the door. His aide entered to inform him that his next appointment was waiting. We'll continue this conversation soon, Cadet Rodriguez, he said formally. But his eyes conveyed the importance of their discussion. In the meantime, maintain your current performance level and say nothing about what we've discussed. Elena saluted and left the office, her mind reeling. As she walked back toward the dormitory, she passed the same cadets who had been mocking her for months, but now she saw them differently. They were preparing for conventional military careers, honorable service in traditional roles. She might be destined for something entirely different. Sarah Chen intercepted her in the hallway, her expression curious. You were in there for a long time, Rodriguez. Must have been quite a conversation. Elena met her gaze steadily. The general was very thorough in his evaluation. Did you mention your family's military background? Sarah asked with false innocence. Oh wait, I forgot. You don't have one. For the first time in months, Elena smiled genuinely. Actually, Sarah, I'm discovering that I know less about my family history than I thought. There's apparently quite a lot to learn. Sarah's confident expression flickered with uncertainty at Elena's calm response, but Elena was already walking away. She had more important things to think about than petty academy politics. That evening, Elena sat in her room holding the pendant and thinking about her great-grandfather. She tried to imagine him as a young man, leading a team of elite operatives on dangerous missions behind enemy lines. She wondered if he had ever doubted himself, if he had ever felt out of place among warriors who seemed born for their roles. She pulled out a piece of paper and began writing a letter to her grandmother, then stopped. How could she ask about family secrets that were classified at the highest levels of government? How could she explain that the simple pendant Maria had given her was actually evidence of extraordinary service? Instead, Elena opened her laptop and began researching everything she could find about unconventional warfare, special operations, and the kind of modern threats General Harrison had mentioned. If she was going to make an informed decision about her future, she needed to understand exactly what she might be choosing. The research revealed a world of shadowy conflicts and emerging dangers that the public never heard about. Cyber attacks that could cripple infrastructure, terrorist cells that moved resources through legitimate businesses, state actors who conducted warfare through economic manipulation and information campaigns. Elena realized that the skills she had been developing, her ability to see patterns others missed, her talent for strategic analysis, her capacity to endure pressure and isolation, might indeed be exactly what was needed for this kind of work. Over the following days, her interactions with the academy staff began to change subtly. Captain Morrison still conducted his drills with military precision, but his hostile focus on Elena seemed to have disappeared overnight. Other instructors began asking her more challenging questions, pushing her to demonstrate advanced tactical thinking. The change was most noticeable during a complex training exercise involving multiple teams and shifting objectives. Elena found herself naturally taking on leadership roles, making decisions that other cadets later admitted they hadn't considered. Her ability to adapt to changing situations and see strategic opportunities impressed even her harshest critics. But it was during a late-night security drill that Elena truly understood what General Harrison had seen in her. The Academy was conducting a simulated infiltration exercise, and Elena was assigned to the defensive team tasked with preventing penetration of their perimeter. While the other defenders focused on obvious approach routes and conventional tactics, Elena studied the exercise parameters and realized that the attacking team would most likely attempt something unexpected. She positioned herself at what seemed like an unlikely breach point and waited. Sure enough, the attacking team tried to exploit a maintenance access that other defenders had overlooked. Elena's interception of their advance not only won the exercise for her team, but demonstrated exactly the kind of unconventional thinking that special operations required. After the exercise, Elena found a note slipped under her door. It simply read, "Library, Section M, tomorrow night at 2200 hours. There was no signature, but Elena knew it was connected to her conversation with General Harrison. The next night, Elena made her way to the library's rarely used historical section. She found General Harrison waiting among the dusty military biography shelves, dressed in civilian clothes rather than his uniform. "You've been impressive this week," he said without preamble. "Your instructors are reporting significant development in tactical thinking and leadership capability." Elena nodded. "I feel like I'm starting to understand things that didn't make sense before, sir. Like pieces of a puzzle falling into place." "That's exactly what I hope to hear," the general replied. "Because I have an offer to make, and I need you to understand both the opportunity and the sacrifice it represents." General Harrison pulled a slim folder from beneath a military history book and set it on the table between them. In the dim light of the library's reading area, Elena could see that it bore classifications she had never encountered before. "What I'm about to show you represents a crossroads in your life," he said quietly. "Once you see this, there will be no going back to the simple path of conventional military service you originally planned." Elena felt her pulse quicken, but she nodded for him to continue. 3 weeks ago, intelligence agencies detected unusual activity patterns that suggest a coordinated international threat. Multiple terrorist organizations that have never cooperated before are suddenly sharing resources and information. State actors who normally compete with each other are collaborating on projects that remain classified even within their own governments. He opened the folder, revealing satellite photographs and communication intercepts that looked like something from a spy thriller. Traditional military and intelligence agencies are designed to handle threats from known enemies using established tactics. What we're facing now is something entirely different. A network of actors using unconventional methods to achieve objectives that could destabilize global security. Elena studied the documents, her mind automatically analyzing patterns and connections. "This looks like they're operating under some kind of unified command structure, but using independent cells to maintain deniability." "Exactly," General Harrison said, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction. "You see what many experienced analysts have missed. This isn't random cooperation. It's a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to exploit weaknesses in conventional defense systems." He turned to another page, showing a world map marked with incident locations. Cyber attacks on power grids, manipulation of financial markets, targeted assassination of key researchers, theft of military technologies. Each incident seems unrelated, but together they form a pattern. Elena felt a chill as she recognized the scope of what she was seeing. Someone is systematically weakening Western military and economic capabilities while building their own strength through acquired technology and resources. "The question," General Harrison continued, "is what to do about it. Traditional military responses are useless against an enemy that doesn't wear uniforms or control territory. Intelligence agencies can gather information, but they lack the operational capability to act on it effectively." Elena looked up from the documents. "You're talking about recreating Black Talon." "Not recreating," the general corrected. "Evolving. The modern version of what your great-grandfather pioneered. A small unit of individuals capable of operating independently, thinking unconventionally, and taking action that officially never happened." Elena sat back in her chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being proposed. "And you want me to be part of this?" "I want you to consider it," General Harrison said, "but understand what you would be choosing. You would leave this academy immediately and begin training that makes everything you've experienced here look elementary. You would give up any hope of a normal military career, recognition for your service, or the ability to speak about your work with anyone. including your family. Elena thought about her mother, working 3 jobs to support them both, dreaming of the day she could attend Elena's graduation ceremony. She thought about the simple pride her grandmother had shown when Elena first put on her academy uniform. What about my family? They would never understand why I left the academy. We would arrange for an appropriate cover story, academic difficulties perhaps, or a medical discharge. Your family would be provided for financially, but you could never tell them the real reason for your departure. Elena fingered the pendant through her shirt. Like my great-grandfather, living with secrets until the day he died. Yes, General Harrison said simply. It's the price of this kind of service. The missions you undertake might save thousands of lives, prevent wars, or stop catastrophic attacks. But you'll never receive credit, never be recognized, never be able to share your accomplishments. Elena stood and walked to the library window, looking out at the academy grounds where she had struggled so hard to prove herself worthy. Now she was being offered something beyond anything she had imagined, but it came with a cost that seemed almost unbearable. How many others would be in this unit? Initially, 6 individuals. You would be the youngest, but your psychological profile and demonstrated capabilities suggest you could contribute significantly to the team dynamic. Elena turned back to face him. And if I refuse? You continue here at the academy, graduate with honors based on your recent performance, and serve with distinction in conventional military roles. There would be no shame in that choice, and no negative consequences for declining this opportunity. Elena walked back to the table and looked again at the intelligence reports. The scope of the threat was staggering, and she could see how traditional military and intelligence approaches would be insufficient to counter it effectively. These people, whoever is coordinating this network, they're counting on our predictable responses, aren't they? They're exploiting the fact that democratic societies have limitations on the methods they can use. General Harrison nodded approvingly. They believe that legal and ethical constraints make us inherently weaker. They think they can operate with impunity because we won't match their willingness to work outside conventional boundaries. But a unit like Black Talon could operate outside those constraints when necessary, within carefully defined parameters and with appropriate oversight. The general clarified, this wouldn't be vigilantism. Every operation would be authorized at the highest levels of government and conducted according to strict protocols. Elena studied the photographs of the coordinated attacks again. She thought about the innocent people who had already died in these seemingly unrelated incidents and about the larger catastrophe that might be coming if this network succeeded in its goals. What kind of training would this involve? General Harrison pulled out another document. 6 months of intensive preparation covering everything from advanced combat techniques to cyber warfare, from psychological operations to deep cover infiltration. You would learn languages, master new technologies, and develop skills that most military personnel never encounter. And after the training, assignments that could take you anywhere in the world. You might spend months establishing a cover identity in a foreign country, or you might need to eliminate a specific threat in a single night. Each mission would be different, each one requiring different capabilities. Elena sat down again, feeling the weight of the decision before her. Everything she had worked for at the academy seemed small compared to the scope of what was being offered, but it also seemed impossibly dangerous and isolating. Can I have time to think about it? 48 hours, General Harrison said. If you decide to accept, you would leave the academy this weekend. If you decline, this conversation never happened, and you continue with your regular training. He gathered up the documents and prepared to leave. One more thing, Elena. Your great-grandfather left behind more than just that pendant. After he died, certain materials were recovered and stored in classified archives. If you joined this unit, you would have access to his operational journals, his strategic insights, and his personal reflections on this kind of service. Elena felt her breath catch. He kept journals? Detailed ones. His thoughts on leadership under extreme pressure. His methods for maintaining psychological stability during long-term deep cover operations. His assessment of the personal costs and moral complexities of this work. They might help you understand not just what you'd be choosing, but how to survive it. After the general left, Elena remained in the library until dawn, thinking about everything she had learned. She tried to imagine herself in 5 years, either as a conventional military officer with a normal career and the possibility of a family and recognition, or as a ghost operating in shadows, protecting people who would never know her name. The next day passed in a blur of routine academy activities that now seemed almost surreal. During tactical exercises, Elena found herself thinking about real-world applications rather than academic scenarios. In history classes, she looked for patterns that might relate to the modern threats General Harrison had described. Her fellow cadets noticed her distraction but attributed it to the pressure of recent evaluations. Sarah Chen made a few pointed comments about Elena seeming overwhelmed by all the attention from important visitors, but Elena barely heard them. That evening, Elena called her mother for the first time in weeks. Maria Rodriguez's voice was filled with pride as she talked about her daughter's progress at the academy, her excitement about the upcoming graduation ceremony, and her plans to take time off work to attend. "Mija, you have given us such hope," her mother said. "Your grandmother lights candles for you every Sunday, praying for your success. We are so proud that you are becoming an officer." Elena felt tears threatening as she listened to her mother's dreams and expectations. How could she explain that she might be about to abandon everything her family had sacrificed for, in favor of a path they could never understand or share? After ending the call, Elena walked to her room and sat on her bed, holding the pendant that had started everything. She thought about her great-grandfather, carrying secrets for decades, unable to share his extraordinary service with the people who loved him. She imagined him as an old man, watching his family struggle with poverty while sitting on medals and commendations he could never display. She wondered if he had ever regretted his choice, if the knowledge of lives saved and disasters prevented had been enough to justify the personal sacrifice. Elena pulled out paper and began writing 2 letters. The first was to her mother, explaining that she was facing an important decision about her military career and asking for her blessing to follow whatever path seemed right, even if it wasn't what they had originally planned. The second letter was never meant to be sent. In it, she tried to explain to her family the choice she was considering, the legacy she had inherited, and the work she might be called to do. Writing it helped her clarify her own thoughts about what she wanted and what she was willing to sacrifice. By morning, Elena had made her decision. She found General Harrison in the Academy's administrative building, where he was conducting routine inspections that provided cover for his real purpose there. When he saw her approaching, he excused himself from the staff meeting and led her to a private office. "I accept," Elena said without preamble. "I want to serve like my great-grandfather did." General Harrison nodded, showing no surprise at her decision. "Are you certain? Once we begin the process, there will be no changing your mind." Elena touched the pendant through her uniform. "I understand the cost, but I also understand that some threats require extraordinary responses. If I have the capability to make a difference, then I have the responsibility to try." "Very well. Your departure from the academy will be processed as a medical discharge related to a family emergency. You'll leave tomorrow morning and report to a facility in Virginia for initial evaluation and processing." Elena felt a mixture of excitement and sadness as she realized she would never see graduation day, never march across the stage in front of her proud family, never experience the normal military career she had originally sought. But as General Harrison handed her a new set of orders marked with classifications she was only beginning to understand, Elena also felt a sense of rightness, as if she was finally stepping into a role she had been meant for all along. "Welcome to the Black Talon legacy, Operative Rodriguez," the general said formally. "Your great-grandfather would be proud." Elena saluted with perfect precision, understanding that this wasn't the end of her academy training. It was the beginning of something far more challenging and important. The pendant felt warm against her chest as she left the office, carrying secrets that would define the rest of her life. The cadets who had mocked her for months watched her pack with curiosity and barely concealed satisfaction, assuming she was finally washing out of the program. As Sarah Chen made a point of offering fake sympathy as Elena carried her belongings to the departure area. "It's probably for the best," Sarah said condescendingly. "Not everyone is cut out for military life. I'm sure you'll find something more suitable to your background." Elena smiled genuinely as she shook Sarah's hand goodbye. "You're absolutely right. I'm definitely finding something more suitable to my background." As the transport vehicle pulled away from the academy, Elena watched the familiar buildings disappear and felt no regret. Somewhere in Virginia, instructors were preparing to teach her skills her great-grandfather had pioneered. And somewhere in the world, threats were developing that would require those skills to counter. Elena Rodriguez, the scholarship girl who had never belonged among conventional military cadets, was finally going home to the shadows where her family's legacy waited.